What is the greatest unsolved mystery of all time? What the hell happened to the 3 escapees of the inescapable Alcatraz? If they did survive or not, but if they did, that's one hell of a plan to escape undetected till to this day. One of their mothers later got anonymous flowers on Mother's Day. I think they probably did survive but assumed new identities. 2 of the escapees were brothers, and it was their mom who got the flowers. At her funeral, 2 tall and ugly women were present but left immediately afterwards and didn't speak to anybody. One I'm always fascinated with is I believe in the mid-2000s a student at Ohio State mysteriously disappeared, and to this day they have no idea what happened to him. Basically, he went out to a popular bar with friends. The security camera sees him walking into the bar, and this is the only entrance exit as the bar is in a larger building, but it never sees him leave the bar at the end of the night. His name was Brian Schaffer. It's an interesting story mystery to take a look at. My favorite is the Chicago TV hijacking. During a DR. Hoorah run in 1987, somebody dressed as Max Headroom hijacked the TV signal for a minute and a half, during which he exposed his ass and got spanked by a woman and mocked Coca-Cola. FCC has been investigating for years and nobody has been charged. It's also one of the more innocent. No one was hurt, no demands were made. It was just some crazy stunt that seemed to done just for the sheer hell of it, and they have never been caught. One of my favorites as well for sure. The consciousness. A child is conceived, and at some point, once the brain becomes complex enough, it starts to develop a feeling of self. It starts to perceive itself as the center of something, and everything else is outside. We naturally distinguish the I from the rest of the world. This is a light that goes on in the head at some point. In deep sleep, under narcotics or after injury, the light can flicker or go out. When we die, the thing that is me is gone forever. Or is it? Religion says it's not. It's a everyday mystery that gets more mysterious the more we think about it. I find this to be the most fascinating question there is. What information was burned in the Library of Alexandria? By law, the library copied every text, keeping the original and giving the original owner a copy. While no doubt a lot of works were lost because the original and the copy were eventually lost, most things of import survived as copies. Further, it was only one of several great libraries of its time, and by the time it was finally destroyed it was already in decline. The disappearance of the Springfield Three is a top contender for me. Long story short, in the early morning hours of the 7th of June, 1992, these 3 women, Cheryl Levitt, 47, her daughter Susan Susie Streeter, 19, and Susie's friend Stacy McCall, 18, all vanished from Cheryl and Susie's home following a night of fun and partying, as it was the girls' high school graduation. All their personal belongings, their cars, purses, and even the little dog was left behind. There were no signs of a struggle or foul play. However, the front porch light's glass globe was broken and not swept up, and there was a weird message of the answering machine that accidentally got deleted. Yet, no trace of the 3 women has ever been found, and the case remains unsolved 30 years later. Disappearance of Asha Degree. In 2000, 9-year-old girl that packed a bag in the middle of a storm and was last seen walking down a highway. A driver approached her to help and she ran into the woods and was never seen again. Nothing suggests why she would run away. Her book bag was found a year later. Most likely she was abducted while walking, but why did she leave her house in the middle of a raging storm? 2 most likely theories. She was groomed by a family friend who convinced her that he had planned a surprise for her parents' anniversary, which was in a week or 2. He tells her to walk a bit from home, where he takes her in the woods and murders her. Accounts say that Asha was a voracious reader and was currently reading a book about children who run away from home or something like that. She left home to go on an adventure. The storm would have only increased the sense of magic and adventure. Unfortunately, she gets caught by someone on the highway who murders her. I actually lean toward number 2. It sounds like something I would have tried to do at that age as an early 9-year-old, and is the reason why I remember the case. The disappearance of a 9-foot great white shark off the coast of Australia. In 2003, researchers tagged a 3-meter, 9-foot, female great white shark to measure water temperature and at what depth. However, the shark disappeared 4 months later. The tag was washed ashore and the researchers found out that the shark dived to a depth of around 610 meters, 2,000 feet, where the temperature shot up from 7 degrees C to 25 degrees C, 46 degree F to 78 degree F. This caused them to believe that the shark was eaten and are now on the hunt for the creature. This has been solved. The movement patterns match that of migrating great white sharks and the temperature recorded is consistent with the internal temp of a migrating great white shark. By tracking size to speed they were able to estimate the size to be a 16 feet great white, which is within their size limit. So it was concluded to be a cannibal great white shark. Cannibalism among sharks is not uncommon. I love unsolved mysteries, but one that always gets me is the murder of Missy Bevers. She was held in the early morning at a church that she taught yoga at. Security footage from the church showed the murderer roaming the halls of the church all night, but that's not what's weird. What's weird is that the murderer was dressed head to toe in police riot gear. It is the weirdest and eeriest video footage and is just unsettling. There's lots of theories, but our murder has never been solved and I believe there hasn't even been a real suspect in the case. The mystery of Kasper Hauser. A youth found wandering Germany in 1828 wearing undersized clothes and no communication skills. After being educated, he claimed to have grown up in the total isolation of a darkened cell. Years later he died after being stabbed by a stranger who gave Kasper a cryptic note, but officials suspected he stabbed himself. Wikipedia. Who stole the 13 pieces of artwork from the Gardner Museum? Where are the paintings now? Where are the men who committed the heist? Gardner Museum heist and BuzzFeed Unsolved did an episode on it. What was in the libraries of Castle Alamut that were destroyed? The castle was sieged and burned in the early Middle Ages by the Mongols, I believe in 1282 AD. They were a league of assassins founded by Hassan I Saber, and the castle, Alamut, was their stronghold. They were involved in political murders and especially high-profile targets. There was said to be beautiful gardens at the castle. The library of the assassin order and the documents were burned during the fall of Alamut. What knowledge did they burn? What secrets did they have? What did the gardens look like, and were these gardens real? The Hashishins and Castle Alamut and Biographics episode. The aerial school landings in Zimbabwe. 60+ school children saw crafts landing and beings coming out of them. The kids interacted with the beings. They were put under evaluation by a Harvard psychiatrist. They all told virtually the same story and drew the same drawings. It was concluded that they were telling the truth. I have not long ago watched a video from Lazy Masquerade. It was about an old woman who was almost deaf and almost blind. If I remember correctly, she was at the age of around 80 years old. 2 people broke into her house, put her into bed, then hurt her. She has later escaped the house, went to the neighbor's home and called the police, saying her phone was not working. Police arrived a few moments later and saw that the sheets were bloody and indeed, the telephone was damaged, one of its main components ripped out. Police thought that she was bluffing due to the reasons I've mentioned, but seeing it right there, they fixed her phone and kept an eye on her. This happened several more times until one fateful day. The lady has been murdered. However, the police said it was of a heart attack. She was found in her bed, face down, hands tied with a scarf, sheets bloody. The kids of the mother didn't believe that the police said it was of natural cause and filed a report against the department. However, that got to nowhere. The police kept it as death of heart attack and the murderers have never been found. This is honestly the most weirdest story of all. The murderers not found and the police shuffling the case to be a natural death that it wasn't. Weird, isn't it? Who really murdered the princes in the tower? The princes in the tower refers to the apparent murder in England in the 1480s of the deposed King Edward V of England and Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York. These 2 brothers were the only sons of King Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, surviving at the time of their father's death in 1483. When they were 12 and 9 years old, respectively, they were lodged in the Tower of London by their paternal uncle and all-powerful regent the Duke of Gloucester. This was supposedly in preparation for Edward V's forthcoming coronation. However, before the young king could be crowned, he and his brother were declared illegitimate. Gloucester ascended the throne as Richard III. It is unclear what happened to the boys after the last recorded sighting of them in the tower. It is generally assumed that they were murdered. A common hypothesis is that they were killed by Richard in an attempt to secure his hold on the throne. Their deaths may have occurred sometime in 1483, but apart from their disappearance, the only evidence is circumstantial. As a result, several other hypotheses about their fates have been proposed, including the suggestion that they were murdered by their maternal uncle the Duke of Buckingham or future brother-in-law King Henry VII, among others. It has also been suggested that one or both princes may have escaped assassination. In 1487, Lambert Simnel initially claimed to be the Duke of York, but later claimed to be York's cousin the Earl of Warwick. From 1491 until his capture in 1497, Perkin Warbeck claimed to be the Duke of York, having supposedly escaped to Flanders. Warbeck's claim was supported by some contemporaries, including York's and the Duchess of Burgundy. In 1674, workmen at the tower dug up, from under the staircase, a wooden box containing two small human skeletons. The bones were widely accepted at the time as those of the princes, but this has not been proven and is far from certain. King Charles II had the bones buried in Westminster Abbey, where they remain. Incidentally, no DNA tests have ever been done on those bones, so while we suspect that they were the princes, we can't be certain. The Yuba County Five. One of the detectives interviewed at some point said not a damn thing about this case makes any sense at all. 5 guys with minor disabilities go to a basketball game. They have their own very anticipated game to play in the next morning. One of the guys even laid out his uniform for the next day. They leave the game they were spectators for. On the drive home, they stopped to buy snacks. The wrappers were found in the car and the cashier remembered them. Then instead of going home, they drive miles and miles out of their way to a national state park, leave their perfectly functioning and fueled car to wander unprepared into the snowy wilderness. A witness claims to have seen a second vehicle and perhaps a woman. A convenience store nearby claimed to have seen them the next day. But 3 of them are found dead in the woods, believed to have died from exposure. A 4th one is found in a trailer in the woods that had sufficient food and heat sources to survive for quite a while, having apparently starved to death and losing 200 pounds before succumbing to that and hypothermia. He had approximately 13 weeks of beard growth. The last man has never been found. So, firstly, why? And then why starve to death in the woods for weeks? If it was foul play, for what purpose? Their car wasn't stolen. There was no money to be gained. Even if it was some weird cult thing, none of them were apparently harmed. They all just died in the woods from staying in the woods. Edit. A lot of people are pointing out that the man who starved to death lacked common sense and his disability might have led to him not wanting to eat stolen food. He was not alone in the trailer the entire time. After he died, someone wrapped his body and head in a way he could not have wrapped himself. His disability alone does not explain his starvation. At least 2 of them made it to the trailer, and some of the food was opened and eaten, but not enough to keep him from starving. Some of the food was stored in an outbuilding. It's just more likely that they didn't look hard enough to find it, more than the starvation. The problem is that they stayed somewhere in the woods for weeks instead of just walking down the road on any particular day the weather was better. The car belonged to Jack Madruga. He really did not like anyone else driving his vehicle, and he was not the one with schizophrenia. So while Gary Mathias absolutely could have initiated the whole event with an episode, he had been taking his meds and he was very unlikely to be at the wheel and just take the other 4 along for the ride. However, I understand it is possible that in the midst of an episode Gary pressured Jack into letting him drive. Their families knew their disabilities a whole hell of a lot better than you do, and their parents let them go to a basketball game together and were baffled at how this happened. I'm sure their disabilities played into how it happened. There's just layers of confusing details and contradictions. So we think the universe was created at the Big Bang, where all of the universe's matter was focused in such a small point and at such a high temperature that it led to the formation of atoms, our laws of physics, solid matter, etc. Makes sense. But what always confuses me is how did that matter get into that point in the first place? Like, we know energy can't be created or destroyed, but it can't have just existed forever, right? Everything must have a beginning, yet this is sort of paradoxical because you can't make something out of nothing. Sure, maybe the Big Bang happened due to the collapse of a previous universe or something. In that case, where did the previous universe come from? Keeps me up at night lol. The killing of Ken McElroy. Man was hated to the bone in the town and his murder had around 45 possible witnesses, but no one claimed to see anything. He terrorized the town, they got tired of it. No one has ever been convicted of being the shooter. It's not really an unsolved mystery. They had a town meeting and basically decided he needed to die. A handful of the men ambushed him. Then there was a conspiracy of silence. I remember that the sheriff also coincidentally left town right before he died before coming back. It's pretty obvious the whole town hated his guts and wanted him dead. The dude was a sociopath who raped children, burned down houses, and killed people's pets and got away with it because he'd intimidate the jury at his trials. Even the cops probably realized that the only way they'd be rid of him is if someone killed him. Maybe not the greatest unsolved mystery of all time, but one that is definitely the greatest unsolved mystery in my hometown is disappearance of 3 boys known as the Lost Boys of Hannibal in May 1967. An adventurous trio of boys went out into the woods near their home in Hannibal, Missouri to explore part of its extensive network of caves. They were never seen again. The story of the Lost Boys of Hannibal has continued to fascinate people across the world ever since. Even now, 54 years later, their loved ones hope to finally solve the mystery and learn what became of the children who simply seemed to vanish into thin air. Did they run away from home? Were they trapped in one of the area's many caves? Were they kidnapped? Murdered? Everyone has their theories, but nothing has ever been proven. How did Aboriginals get to Australia 50,000 years ago? This was very recently after humans started to leave Africa, and they would have only had the most primitive rafts for a very tough 7-day voyage. But what's weird is that Aboriginals then had no history of seafaring after. So it's like this group hopped on a raft and by some miracle, or mistake, made it Australia and then were like, duck that, we're never doing that again. Must have been a traumatic voyage. Dan Cooper. An insane Chad. Unknown fate. Info. This Dan Cooper hijacked a plane in Northwest Airlines. He asked for the waitress and gave her the note saying, I have TNT, and would like for you to stay here. No funny stuff, he said it. The plane was back on ground, all hostages released, except the flight crew, and most of passengers didn't even notice. He demanded 2 main parachutes and 2 reserve ones. And also money. He demanded flight to Mexico, but it was impossible. So they refueled in Seattle Dart. He was very explicit in flight configurations, but didn't specify the route. Weird. When the plane landed for refuel, he wasn't there. He jumped from commercial plane on low altitude in cold weather. Most of Air Force paratroopers wouldn't do this jump. Mind you, he was in civilian clothes. Look up full story on YouTube channel, let me know.